Okay, let's see this question. The number of permutations of characters LILAC so that no character appear in its original position if the two L are indistinguishable means both L are identical. Indistinguishable means identical. So he is asking, basically he is asking derangement. Derangement means no no character is in its original position. For example, let's assume we have a word. Let's assume we have a word ABC. Let's assume this is the original word that we have. Let's assume this is the original word. Now we know that there are six permutations, total six permutation. For example, this is one possible permutation. For example, this is one possible permutation, and so on. Total six permutations are there for this original word. But you see, in this permutation, if you focus on this permutation, then in this permutation no word is no letter is in its original position. You see, the original position of A was the first position, but A is not in the first position. Similarly, original position of B was second position, but B is not in the second position. Similarly, the original position of C was third position, but C is not in the third position. So you can see this is a derangement. This kind of permutation is called derangement. Derangement means basically no character is no character is present in its original position. So it is called derangement. Okay. This is not a derangement. Why? Because you can see this A is present in its original position. So this is not a derangement. So this is a derangement. This is not a derangement. Now he is asking the number of derangements of LILAC. This is the word he has given, and the number of derangements he is asking for this word, such that no character basically appears in its original position. And remember, both L are identical. So you cannot directly apply the formula here, because there is a formula for finding the number of derangement. But that direct formula you can apply when all the characters are different. If all the characters are different, then you can apply that direct formula. Okay, but here this 2L, they are identical, they are not different. So that's why we cannot apply the direct formula here. So let's solve it by just our intuitive method. We can solve it. See, because these L are identical, okay, so in any word that we want to make those word in which no character is appearing in its original position. So remember, in the first position L cannot appear. Why? Because the original position of L is first and third. So when we are saying that no character appears in its original position, then basically we are saying that L cannot appear in the first position, also L cannot appear in the third position. So what are the possible positions for L? The possible position for L are these. So let's consider these cases when L is present in the second place. I told you that the possible position for L is second, fourth and fifth. Now let's take those cases when L is present in the second position. So remember, when L is present in the second position, in the first position L cannot be present. The second one L we have put in the second position. Now the another L we cannot put in the first position. Similarly, the another L we cannot put in the third position. Okay, I told you that L cannot be put in the first, L cannot be put in the third position. So if you are putting one L in the second position, then what are the chances for the second L? The chances are maybe the second L is in the fourth position. Now, if this L is in the second position, this L is in the fourth position, then the remaining characters are IAC. Remember, this second position was I, or in the original word, the second position was I, but now we have put L in the second position. So automatically wherever we put I, this I will not be in the original position, because these are the possible choices for I. These are the possible choices for I, and wherever you put I, the I will not be in its original position. Now let's see A. Similarly, the original position of A is fourth, but in the fourth position we have put L. So now wherever you put A, the A will not be in its original position. Okay, now the last character is C. So you see in the original word the original position of C is fifth. So we should take care that we should not put C here. Remember, we should not put C in the fifth position. So how many such words we can make? Of course we cannot put C here. So how many words we can make? These three characters IAC, these three characters can be arranged in 3 factorial ways, but out of these 3 factorial ways we should subtract those ways in which C is present in the fifth position. So how many ways are there? There are 2 such ways, so we should subtract them, and finally we will get 4. So 4 words are possible when L is in the second position, L is in the fourth position. Okay, such 4 words are possible. Now let's assume that L is in the second position but the second L is in the fifth position. Now what will happen if first L is in the one L is in the second position, another L is in the last position? Then what will happen? Same scenario will happen. The same scenario, because the remaining letter are IAC. Using those letter you can make 3 factorial permutation you can make, but you should subtract 2 permutation. Why are you subtracting 2 permutation? Because if you see this A, then the original position of A is fourth position, so you cannot put A in the fourth position. This you cannot do. So we are subtracting those words in which A is in the fourth position. So there are 2 such words, so we should subtract it, so we will get 4 more words. Now what is the last case possible? The last case possible is that L is in fourth comma fifth position. This is the last case possible. Okay, both L are in fourth comma fifth position. Now how many words are there? Again, the remaining letter are IAC, so using those letter you can make 3 factorial permutation, but you should subtract 2 again. Why? Because you see this I, the original position of I is second position, so you cannot put I in the second position. So these 2 we are subtracting for this situation when I is in the second position. That situation we are subtracting. So finally we will get 4 such words. Now we have basically covered all the possibilities, and total number of words that we will get is 12. 4 plus 4 plus 4, 12 total such words we will get. Remember, in all these words you can see that no letter, no character appears in its original position. So this is how you can solve this question. Because I am explaining this question, so it has taken time, but it won't take this much time. You can very easily you can solve it in within 1 minute. You can solve this question. Remember, you cannot apply the derangement formula here directly, because the derangement formula that you have, that you can apply when all the characters are different. Here all the characters are not different. You can see these two L that you have, these two L are indistinguishable, means they are identical. Okay, so that's why you can apply this approach. This is a very intuitive approach, this you can apply. Okay, let's see the next question. The next question is it is saying that let R be the set of all binary relations on set 1 2 3. Okay, so what he's saying? He's saying that R is basically set of all binary relation. We already know that if you are defining a relation on a set A, then basically a relation on remember this thing, relation R on a set A, then relation is nothing but subset of A cross A. We already know this thing. This is cross product A cross A. Any relation on a set A is nothing but the subset of A cross A. This A cross A means cross product of A. So how many elements are there in A cross A? In A cross A, we have n square elements. Remember, let's assume that the cardinality of A is n. Let's assume that this set A has n elements. Then this A cross A will have n square elements. So this A cross A will have n square element, and R is nothing but a subset of A cross A. So how many subsets are possible? Total 2 power n square. These many subsets are possible. So these many relations are possible. Remember, so these many relations are possible because every subset of A cross A is a relation. So these many relations are possible. Now he has given that this R is set of all binary relation. So basically the cardinality of R is nothing but 2 power n square, because these many binary relations are possible if the set A has cardinality n. In our question he has given that the set has cardinality 3, so basically he has given that n is equal to 3. So at the end what we will do, we will replace this n with 3. But anyway, this is the total number of relations possible on a set A which has n elements. Now let's see how many reflexive relations are possible. Let's see how many reflexive relations are possible, the number of reflexive relations. So what is a reflexive relation? A reflexive relation is a relation in which we have this kind of pair for all A belongs to A. So basically we have this kind of pair. Okay. Now such kind of relations are called reflexive relation. So actually to find the number of reflexive relation, what we can do, we can represent a relation in matrix format. Okay, for example, how do we represent a relation in matrix format? So the columns are 1, 2 and so on, n elements we have. Let's assume this set A has n elements, so 1, 2 and so on, n elements we have. Now how do we represent a relation in matrix format? So we put 1, for example in this cell 1 comma 1 we put 1 if they are related. Okay, in this cell 2 comma 3 we put a 1 if 2 is related to 3 and so on. So this is how we can represent a relation in matrix format. Now you see we are interested in finding the reflexive relation. What is a reflexive relation? Reflexive relation is a relation in which we have a comma a, this type of pair we have for all A. Basically we have 1 comma 1, 2 comma 2, 3 comma 3 and so on, a n comma n. So basically we are saying that we have 1 comma 1, 2 comma 2, 3 comma 3 and so on, we have n comma n. So all these diagonal elements, you can see all these diagonal elements will be 1. All these diagonal elements will be 1. Why? Because in a reflexive relation all these pairs must be present, so we will put 1 in all these diagonal elements. Okay, so these diagonal elements we do not have any choice, we have to put 1 in all the diagonal cells. Okay, because we are interested in reflexive relation. But remember, in all remaining cells, in all remaining pairs, in all remaining pairs, or you can say in all remaining cells, we have choice. Either we can take them, either we can reject them. Basically either we can put 0 or we can put 1. So each of these cells, each of these remaining cells have two choices. Each cell has two choices, 0 or 1. 0 will mean that that pair is not present in our relation, and 1 will mean that that pair is present in our relation. So you can see for the remaining elements, how many remaining elements are there? These elements, the remaining elements, basically the elements other than the elements on the diagonal. So how many remaining element we have? We have n square minus 1, n square minus n. These are the remaining elements we have, and each of these elements have two choices, so finally how many reflexive relation we can make? We can make 2 power n square minus 1, n square minus n. These many reflexive relations we can make. Okay, so these many relations are reflexive relations. Now we have seen that the total number of relations is 2 power n square. This is the total number of relation. Okay, and how many reflexive relation we have? Number of reflexive relation is 2 power n square minus n. These are the number of reflexive relation. In the question you can see he is asking that from the set of all relations, if you pick a relation at random, then what is the probability that the chosen relation is reflexive? So the probability he is asking, uh, if you pick a relation from the set of all relations, then what is the probability that that the chosen relation is reflexive? So the probability, if you see, the probability will be basically number of favorable cases. Okay, number of favorable cases and divided by number of total cases. What is number of favorable cases? Because we are interested in reflexive relation, so number of favorable cases will be 2 power n square minus n, means number of reflexive relations. The total number of relations are 2 power n square. This is the total number of relations, and in the question he has given n equal to 3, so just put n equal to 3 and you will get 2 power 6 divided by 2 power 9, and this will be 1 divided by 2 power 3, that is nothing but 1 divided by 8, and that is nothing but 0.125. So this will be our answer, and this will be our probability. Let's see next question. In the next question, he is saying that a graph G is obtained by adding a vertex to K33. What is K33? K33 is nothing but basically the K33 is nothing but a complete bipartite graph where one partition has 3 vertices, another partition has 4 vertices. For example, this is A, B, C, and maybe this is M, N, P, Q, maybe. So basically, this K33 is this K34 is nothing but a complete bipartite graph in which one partition has 3 elements, another partition has 4 elements. Now he is saying that what we do to this K34, we add a vertex S such that we make this S adjacent to every vertex of K34. So this S, what we do, we make it adjacent to every vertex. We make it adjacent to every vertex. Okay, we make it adjacent to every vertex. This is what we do. Okay, and of course this K34 itself is a this K34 itself is a complete bipartite graph. So you have all these kind of edges, you already have. Okay, so all these kind of edges you already have. Now this is your complete this is the graph he is in. So this is the graph basically. Okay, this is the graph G. Now he is asking what is the minimum number of colors required to edge color. So he is asking the edge coloring number, how many minimum colors we require to edge color this graph. What is edge coloring? So if you have a graph, then the edge coloring means you are giving color to the edges. For example, let's assume this edge I give color red. Okay, then remember, because this edge I have given the color red, so now this edge cannot be given red color. Similarly, this edge cannot be given red color. Why? Because if you see, let's assume this is ABC. If you see this edge, then this edge is AB. So the end points of this edge is A comma B, and the end point of this edge is B comma C. So this edge is adjacent to this edge. This edge is adjacent to this edge. Why? Because they are sharing a common end point. So whenever two edge, you have one edge, let's assume this is one edge, let's assume this is another edge, then these are called adjacent edges. Why? Because they are sharing a common endpoint. If you take this graph, let's assume you take this graph, let's assume this is E1, let's assume this is E2. This E1 and E2, they are not adjacent. Why? Because they are not sharing any common endpoint. The endpoint of E1 are these, and endpoint of E2 are these. So E1, E2, they are not sharing any common endpoint, so these are not adjacent. So this is the concept of adjacent edges. Okay, we say that two edges are adjacent if and only if they share a common endpoint. Okay, so now when we give color, for example, let's assume I give this edge, I give color red, then remember I cannot give this color red. Why? Because they are adjacent edges. So no two adjacent edges should get same color. So if this edge is getting red color, then this edge should get maybe some different color, maybe blue color, because these edges are adjacent edges, so they should not get same color. Now if we want to edge color this graph, then you can notice one thing. See, this edge, 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 these 7 edges, if you see, all these 7 edges are sharing a common endpoint S. If you see, all these 7 edges, all these 7 edges are sharing common endpoint S. So all these 7 edges must get different color. Let's assume that this edge is getting color 1, this edge is getting color 2, this edge is getting color 3, this edge is getting color 4, 5, 6, 7. Remember, all these edges should get different color because all these 7 edges are sharing a common endpoint, that is S. So that's why at least 7 colors we need. You can see at least 7 colors we need. Now we do not need any more color, because what we can do, we can very easily utilize these 7 colors. What we do like this. So I told you that we do not we need at least 7 colors we need, but more than 7 colors we do not need. For example, let's assume this is A, B, C, let's assume this is M, P, Q, R. Then now once we have already given 7 colors to the 7 edges that are going out of S, or to all these edges we have given 7 different colors, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 7 different colors we have already given. Now to the to the edges of this complete bipartite graph, to the edges of this complete bipartite graph, we do not need to give any new color. Why? Because let's assume this one, this color 1 is going to this vertex. Let's assume this edge, basically this edge has color 1. Then because this edge has color 1, so no, none of these edges have color 1. So what you can do, you can utilize this color 1. What you can do, you can do like this. Maybe you can give this edge color 1. Okay, maybe you can give this edge color 1. So this is how you can utilize. So this color 1 has been utilized here. Similarly, let's assume that this color 7 is this color 7 is basically between this color 7 is given to the edge SM. Let's assume this color 7 is given to the edge between S and M. So because this edge is given color 7, so you can utilize this color 7. How can you utilize? You can give this edge, you can give this edge color 7, you can give this edge color 7, you can give this edge color 7, and so on. So this is how you can utilize all the colors. Okay, so one by one you can utilize all the colors. Let's assume that this 6 is going to P. Let's assume this color 6 is given to the edge that is connecting S and P. Now this 6 also you can utilize, because the this 6, how can you utilize? What you can do, maybe you can give this 6 to QC. Okay, to this QC, to this edge you can give this color 6. Okay, maybe to this edge RA, to this edge maybe you can give the color 6, and so on. So this is how you can try, and basically you can utilize these 7 colors, and using these 7 colors you can color the this complete bipartite graph also. So how many colors you need? You need 7 colors. But remember, at least 7 colors you need. Why? Because all these 7 edges, if you see, all these 7 edges, if you see, that are going out of S, all these 7 edges are basically sharing a common endpoint, that is S. So all these edges must be given different color. So at least 7 color you need. Okay, so this is how actually using 7 color you can color all the edges of this graph. So this will be the answer. You can just try, and you can see I have almost I have completed it. But you can if they all the remaining edges that are there, you can also color them by utilizing the all these 7 colors you can utilize. Okay, let's see this next question. What it is saying? It is saying that let G be a group of 35 elements. So he is saying that G is a finite group because this G has 35 elements. So this G is a finite group, and the order of this group is 35. Because order of a group, what is order of a group? Order of a group is nothing but number of elements in that group. So this G has 35 elements, so the order of this G will be 35. Okay, now he is saying that what is the largest possible subgroup of G other than G? Okay, so he is asking what is the largest possible subgroup of G other than G. So we have a Lagrange theorem. What is Lagrange theorem? Lagrange theorem says that if G is finite group, if G is finite group, okay, and let's assume L is subgroup of G, then basically the the order of L divides order of G. What I mean to say? I mean to say that order of L basically divides order of G. This is the Lagrange theorem. Okay. Now your order of G is 35. 35 is nothing but 7 into 5. This is 35. So the largest possible subgroup, if we want to find, then that will be subgroup of size 7, because the subgroup of size 7 will divide 35. Remember, no other number greater than 7 can divide 35. Of course 35 can divide 35, but in the question he has given that we are interested in a subgroup which is other than G itself, so we cannot take 35. And after 35, what is the next value that can divide 35? That is 7. So this 7 is the largest subgroup that is possible. Okay, and we have just used the Lagrange theorem. Lagrange theorem says that if G is a finite group, then and also if G is a finite group and L is subgroup of G, then order of L will divide order of G. This is the theorem. This theorem we have used, and we got that the largest subgroup that we can get that we can have is of order 7. Okay, So the answer will be 7. Let's see the next question. What is this next question? In this question he is saying that which of these formula is not logically valid. Which of these formula is not logically valid? Let's see. And in this question he is saying that w is a predicate formula without any free occurrence of x. So basically this w is a formula in which we do not have any free occurrence of x. What it means? It means that basically this w is this this w is free from this variable x. Okay, this w is free from the variable x. Okay, so that is the meaning of this w. On this w the x cannot put any effect, so this w is free from x. Okay, for example, remember, for example, this px is not free from x, but this w is given that this w is free from x. This is the meaning of okay, so this is the meaning of this line, that w is a predicate formula without any free occurrence of x. It means that w is free from x. In w we do not have any free variable x. Or you can think like this: in w we do not have any x. This is how you can think. In w we do not have any x. This is how you can think. Anyway, let's see which of these is not logically valid, and the answer actually will be our B. Answer will be B. Let's check B. Okay, let's check all these options. We will check, don't worry, we will check all these options. First we will check option B. What is option B? Option B is for all x px implies w, this is equivalent to for all x px implies w. Let's check whether it is it is true or not. So we will take the case 1. The case 1 we will take, what if w is true? This is the case 1 we will take. Let's assume that w is true, because w is free from x. So w, on w you cannot like this for all quantifier cannot put any effect on w. Okay, so that is the meaning of this line. Okay, that this w is free from x, or you can say in w we do not have any occurrence of x. So case 1 is, what if w is true? If w is true, then what will happen? This is the LHS. Remember, this is the LHS we have, and this is the RHS we will have. So if w is true, then what will happen? This LHS will become C. If this w is true, then this complete thing is true. So the LHS will become for all x true, because this internal thing will become true. Okay, this is the LHS. This is the LHS. Now what is RHS? In RHS, if w is true, then automatically this complete thing will become true, because we know that p implies q. If q is true, then this complete thing is true. So this complete RHS will become true. Okay, what is this? For all x true, it means true, because for all x true, for every x it is true. So yes, it is true. So true true is equivalent to true. Yes, so in this case 1, when w is true, in this case it is satisfied that both are true. Okay, let's take the case 2. What is case 2? In case 2 w is false. What if w is false? Let's assume w is false. Remember, when we have p implies q, and if q is false, then what will happen? If q is false, then this p implies q will become this p implies q will become negation of p. Why? Because if q is false, then if p is true, then this complete thing will become false. If p is false, then this complete thing will become true. Or you can think like, okay, don't worry, let's see like this. P implies q, we know that this p implies q can be written like this: p dash plus q. Now if q is false, then it will become p dash plus false. What is p dash plus false? That is nothing but p dash. So remember, whenever you have p implies q, and this q, basically this RHS of this implication, if this is false, then this complete implication can be written like p dash. Now if w is false, then what this LHS will become? This LHS will become for all x negation of px. This will be our LHS, because if w is false, then this thing will become negation of px. What will happen to RHS? Let's see what will happen to RHS. If w is false, then this complete thing will become negation of for all x px. So this is for all x negation px, and what is this? This is nothing but there exists x negation px, because what we can apply, we can apply the negation of quantifier. So we will get there exists x, there exists x negation of px. So as you see, this is for all x negation of px, this is there exists x negation of px. So definitely they are not equivalent. This is saying that, this is basically saying that there exists x for which px is false, and this is saying that for all x px is false. So definitely they are not same. So you can see that this formula, so you can see this is not this is not equivalent to this, so we can say that this b is invalid. Okay, this is how you can prove it. So we have proven that this b is invalid. We have proven, basically you can use this method to prove anything. Let's take this this one example d we can take, and you can try this a and c. Let me take d. So what is d? D is px and w. This is equivalent to there exist x px and w. The same thing we will do. The case 1, what is case 1? Case 1 is, what if w is true? See, if w is true, then this, what it will become, px and true. Px and true is nothing but px, so this will become p, there exists x px. This is LHS. What is this RHS? What it will become? It will become, if w is true, then this complete thing will become there exists x px. You can see LHS is equivalent to RHS. There exists x px, there exists x px. So in this case 1 there is no problem. Let's see the case 2. What if w is false? If w is false, then you know, if this is false, then the RHS will become completely false. Okay, because if w is false, then this and false is nothing but false. What about it? So if w is false, then this thing will become false, so it will become there exist x false. There exists x false, so this is also false. Basically, for every element you can see, for every element it is becoming false. So there exists x false means it is also false. So it is also false. False is equivalent to false. So that's why we can say that in case 1 also they are equivalent, in case 2 also they are equivalent. Hence what you can say, that this a is this d, because we were checking d, so this d is valid, this b is not valid. Similarly, this a is also valid. Similarly, this c is also valid. You can check this this a will be valid. The same thing you need to do. Take two case. Case 1, in case 1 you take w to be true. You take case 2, in case 2 you take w to be false. You check this case. In this case they must be equivalent, and also in this case they must be equivalent. If there is at least one case, let's assume they are equivalent in this case, but let's assume they are not equivalent in this case, then what will happen? Then we will say that this is invalid. But this is not invalid. You can check it out. uh, this and this, they are valid, and this is not valid. We have shown it, we have proven it. Okay, so this is how you can solve this question. We have explained, we have given the proof of b, we have given the proof of d. You can solve a, you can solve c by using the same method. There is no there is no like, there is no difficulty in this. You can use the same method and you will get the answer. Okay. Okay.